Veterans Day, 10:42 a.m. The colonel hit the ground mid-speech, and I still smelled burnt cider in the air. Name's Thalia 36, waitress at Miller's Diner. Or at least that's what the patch says. The chipped ceramic mug in my hand didn't shake, but every eye around me did. Ever had the truth hit harder than the rumor? What would you have done if all it took to be doubted was standing too still this Veterans Day morning? One pair of eyes saw past the apron and into something far older than her smile. Steam curled lazily from chipped coffee mugs as the golden morning light spilled across the linoleum floors. The bell above the door chimed now, and then followed by the familiar greetings of townsfolk wrapped in flannel and routine. The air inside was heavy with the scent of bacon grease, maple syrup, and something unspoken like a hush only she seemed to notice. Thalia moved behind the counter like she'd been born into the rhythm. Quiet steps, efficient hands, an ever-ready coffee pot. Her gaze swept gently over the room, not searching, not staring, just registering. She never turned her back to the entrance. Never. And when a plate slipped from someone's hand and shattered by the sink, she didn't flinch. Not even a blink. Her hand merely tightened around the handle of the pot before easing back into motion. Outside, American flags lined the sidewalks in even intervals, fluttering as the parade crowd slowly built. Inside, a different kind of ritual was underway. "Paper, Dale?" Thalia asked, already setting it down before the old man nodded. Dale Whitaker grunted, folding his arms over a denim vest weighed down with faded patches. A small pin read First Infantry Division. He didn't smile often, and he didn't smile now. "All these folks who show up on Veterans Day like it's Halloween," he said, half to the room, half to no one. The booth behind him chuckled. "Gotta weed out the posers somehow," someone added. Thalia leaned slightly to straighten the sugar packets. Her sleeves were rolled down past the wrist. Always. Even in the warmth of the diner, even when her arms should have wanted to breathe. The door opened again. Kayla Boone breezed in with a gust of November chill and nervous energy. Her blonde braid bounced over a hoodie printed with "Support Our Troops." She waved quickly to Linda Sue behind the pie counter and made a beeline for Dale. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker," she chirped, sliding into the booth across from him. "You hear the band's doing a medley this year. They've got Battle Hymn and God Bless the USA back to back." Dale snorted. "They do it every year." Kayla laughed awkwardly, then sobered. I think I'm gonna enlist." Dale lowered his mug. "You sure?" She nodded, then added, "Jake would have wanted me to, I think." That name hushed the table like a curtain drawn. Dale's jaw tensed. Across the room, Thalia refilled Mr. Boyd's decaf, then drifted toward their booth. She didn't interrupt, only adjusted Dale's chair with a quick press of the toe against the leg. He noticed. His eyes tracked the way she moved, balanced, deliberate. When she turned, Dale spoke low, but not low enough. "Some folks play soldier real well." Kayla's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He gestured subtly with his chin toward Thalia. "People like her. Never saw a day in uniform, but carry themselves like they earned it." Thalia was at the counter folding napkins into tight, crisp triangles. Her face remained neutral, but each fold came down with almost imperceptible force. Kayla, caught between confusion and curiosity, wandered to the counter. "Morning," she offered. Thalia looked up, her eyes unreadable. "Morning, sugar." "You ever serve, ma'am?" There was a pause, measured but not awkward. "Just serve breakfast," Thalia replied, sliding a fresh set of napkins into the holder. Outside, the sound of a distant marching band floated on the wind. The crowd began to thin as people migrated toward the square. Kayla adjusted her coat. Guess I'll head over. You coming? Thalia shook her head gently. Someone's got to hold the fort. Dale stood, dropped $1 on the counter, and left a folded napkin beneath it. Kayla didn't see what it said. As she pushed open the door, the bell gave its usual jingle, and the cold met her cheeks. But something made her turn back. Just for a second. Through the diner's glass window, she sees Thalia gently touch her wrist, where her sleeve slips just enough to reveal a faded tattoo. She didn't want to be noticed. But when the training kicks in before the applause, people start asking questions. The Cypress Ridge town square buzzed with celebration, alive with red, white, and blue streamers, the clang of brass instruments, and the smoky aroma of hot dogs curling into the crisp air. Children darted between booths clutching plastic flags, and retirees leaned on canes telling half-remembered stories to anyone who'd listen. Veterans Day had always drawn a crowd here, not large by any means, but familiar, like everything in Cypress Ridge. Near the flagpole, a plaque shimmered faintly in the sun. Among the sepia-toned faces etched into the memorial board, Jake Boone's photo rested in the top right corner. His eyes, even in black and white, were stubbornly bright. Kayla stood a few feet away, trying not to look at it too long. Her arms were folded across her hoodie. Somewhere to her left, Dale barked instructions at the ROTC kids organizing the makeshift tactical challenge zone. He looked tense, tenser than usual. Earlier that morning, Dale said, "Fake heroes don't know how to keep their hands still." The words echoed now, unwanted. She scanned the crowd, then spotted Thalia standing under the overhang near the cider stand, hands buried deep in the pockets of her coat. Her posture relaxed. But Kayla noticed the way she kept her back to the stone wall, the way her eyes moved, not in curiosity, but calculation. Watching entry points, exits, vulnerable lines. It gave her pause. A boy no older than 8 stepped onto the wooden demonstration platform, holding a plastic replica M4. His dad, likely a former Marine, was walking him through the stance. "Barrel up, buddy, elbows tucked." "Steady," the man said, crouching beside him. But the boy's footing shifted on a loose board. He stumbled forward. The toy weapon swung out across the platform toward the group of children waiting in line. Before the gasps could even form into sound, Thalia moved. 3 steps. A pivot. One hand gripped the weapon's frame, the other reached the safety. She flipped the mock selector switch, popped the magazine with her thumb, checked the chamber, then clicked the mechanism back into neutral. All in maybe 4 seconds, maybe less. The silence after was crushing. Even the music from the loudspeakers stuttered as though unsure whether to keep playing. The father blinked. Thanks," someone near the cider stand whispered. "Did you see that?" Another murmured, "She a vet." Then Dale's voice cut through the confusion. "That kind of training isn't from waitressing." Thalia handed the replica back to the startled boy crouching to his level. "Keep your feet under you," she said gently, then stood and resumed her place by the booth. People began inching closer, subtle but collective. A ripple of attention. More phones appeared, angled subtly, or not so subtly, in her direction. Kayla stayed frozen, heart knocking against her ribs. Her breath caught as someone behind her said, "You see the tattoo on her wrist? That's a SEAL trident." Dale stepped forward. "That's not a thing to fake, Miss Cruz." Thalia looked at him, but said nothing. "Stolen valor is a felony," Dale continued. "You impersonating a SEAL, that's not something this town tolerates." Murmurs rose in volume. Some voices echoed in concern, others in disbelief. Thalia's silence made it worse. "Say something," a woman hissed from the back. Still nothing. Then the crowd parted just a little. A silver-haired man in a blue blazer with too many pins to count stepped forward. Colonel Everett Langston, the guest of honor. His gait was measured deliberate, like memory itself walked with Hee-sung. He peered at Thalia, eyes narrowed under thick brows. "Do I know you?" he asked softly. Thalia's response came without pause. "No, sir." There was no edge to it, no avoidance, just a calm refusal to confirm or deny. The colonel blinked, then took a slow step back. Dale's jaw clenched. "We need answers," he muttered, gesturing toward the local sheriff stationed by the edge of the crowd. "She needs to be questioned." "I'll wait by the bench," Thalia said calmly, already turning toward the edge of the square. Kayla stepped forward, words catching in her throat. "Why won't you say something?" "Because truth is louder when others say it for you." Colonel Langston collapsed mid-sentence. Thalia moved before anyone else even exhaled. The podium trembled slightly as his hand clutched its edge. His speech, once steady though aged, had started to meander a few moments earlier. Most thought it was emotion. It was Veterans Day after all, and the names he read carried weight. "You can always tell a soldier," Dale had said earlier, "by how fast they act under pressure, or don't." Now all eyes had been on the colonel as he slowly pronounced the list of the fallen. His voice cracked on Jake Boone's name. Then, just as the wind rose and rippled the flags, his shoulders sagged. His knees gave. The mic screeched and toppled sideways as Colonel Langston dropped behind the podium. Gasps rippled through the square. A woman screamed. People surged forward instinctively, but it was Thalia who reached him first. No hesitation. She crouched beside the crumpled form, her flannel sleeves sliding back just enough to reveal a tan line and part of a faded tattoo. Her hands moved without fanfare, tilting his head gently, checking his airway, with her fingers brushing back his collar to find a pulse. "Pulse is faint," she muttered. "Breathing's shallow." No EMTs were visible. The town's single paramedic was across the square, blocked by booths and panicked onlookers. Thalia glanced once, sharp and controlled, before calling to a stunned volunteer in uniform. "You, get the med kit. It's in the blue crate by the stage. There's an EpiPen inside." He bolted without a word. Kayla stood rooted a few feet away, phone held aloft but forgotten. Her eyes were locked on the scene. She hadn't planned to film anymore, but her camera had been recording. It captured the moment Langston fell. It caught the instant Thalia's instincts kicked in. It caught everything. Dale was further back, arms still crossed, but his brow creased now, not in judgment, but in concern. He watched as Thalia pressed 2 fingers to the colonel's neck again, scanning the man's face like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Langston's lips were pale. Thalia leaned close, brushed something from his mouth, and muttered, "You're not dying today, sir." The crowd held its collective breath. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. Somewhere a vendor shut off a portable speaker. The flags overhead flapped like soft applause no one was willing to give yet. Then Langston's fingers twitched. A soft flutter of movement, barely more than a breath, stirred in his chest. His eyelids fluttered, and he exhaled. Thalia's shoulders eased by a fraction, but her focus didn't slip. The volunteer returned, panting, holding the small orange kit. Thalia opened it in one motion, loaded the injector, and pressed the needle into Langston's thigh through his slacks. A beat. 2. Langston's eyes opened barely but enough. His voice was the sound of gravel and memory. "Ghost 23, he rasped. The people closest to him didn't understand. But Dale heard. He stiffened. Thalia didn't reply. She just nodded once, barely perceptible, and brushed his jacket closed. Kayla slowly lowered her phone. She wasn't shaking. She was certain. She looked over at Dale, whose expression had shifted from tight suspicion to something looser, more troubled. A crack in the armor. Her voice was low, nearly swallowed by the wind, but the words carried. She's not a fake, Mr. Whitaker. She's the real damn thing. Colonel Langston asked for her by name, the one they'd buried in a file 9 years ago. The first aid tent behind the stage was dim lit only by a flickering fluorescent tube that buzzed like a distant hornet trapped behind plastic. It cast shadows on the canvas walls which rippled gently with the breeze. The sound of the ceremony drifted in faintly muffled brass scattered applause, the shuffle of folding chairs being stacked in neat rows. But in here time slowed to a pause. Thalia stood near the foot of the cot, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She hadn't sat down. Not once. Colonel Langston, his breathing now more stable, blinked up at her. His eyes were wet, not from the episode, but from something older, deeper. You said, ghost, he rasped. Thalia didn't answer. You knew I'd recognize it, he added. You always were sharper than the rest. Still, she stayed silent. Langston pushed himself up slowly with one elbow, grimacing, but determined. His voice steadied. Lieutenant Thalia Vera Cruz, he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. SEAL Team 6, Syria, March 2014. She flinched. Barely. But it was enough. Outside, Kayla paced in the lengthening shadows, pausing by the tent flap every few steps, unsure whether to enter or keep guarding the truth she didn't fully understand. Inside, Langston's gaze sharpened with memory. They told me you were KIA, killed in that ambush outside Arraka. But that wasn't true, was it? Thalia looked down at her boots. You pulled me out, Langston whispered. I was unconscious. The others, they were already gone. You were bleeding from the shoulder, couldn't walk straight. But you carried me through 5 miles of desert hell. Her eyes closed. I remembered flashes after. A hand on my collar. The sound of your voice telling me to shut up and keep breathing. He chuckled and then coughed. Only a ghost would bark orders like that and then vanish. She leaned against the tent pole, finally speaking. You were unconscious for 2 days. When I got you to the safe house, the agency had already begun the cover-up. Said it was cleaner if no one knew you survived. Blamed the ambush on faulty intel. Langston nodded. They said leaving you dead was strategic. Said it would protect you. And me. But really it was about politics, elections, promotions, and I... He paused, shame clouding his face. I didn't stop them. I owed too many favors, and I was too damn tired to fight. A long silence settled between them. Then, with trembling hands, Langston reached to the side of the cot, pulling up a small wooden box. He opened it gently, like it contained glass. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lay a Medal of Honor. Her name, Lieutenant Thalia Vera Cruz, was etched on the back, in clean serif letters. Thalia stared at it. I had it made, he said. Privately. Quietly. For the record they erased. She didn't move. That belongs to ghosts, she murmured. I'm just the one left standing. Outside, Kayla froze at the edge of the canvas. The words cut sharper than any citation. Langston studied the medal. Maybe he said quietly. But some ghosts deserve to be remembered. Kayla pushed the flap aside and entered. She had heard enough. You should tell people, she said. They need to know who you are. Thalia turned eyes dark with a lifetime of being misread. They already decided who I was. Long ago, but I didn't. and now I want to make it right. Before you raise a weapon, she told Kayla, you better know what you're willing to lose. The air held a brittle chill, the kind that snapped against bare skin and clung to your lungs like cobwebs. The abandoned shooting range sat just past the tree line, forgotten by most, save for the rusted silhouettes lined in uneven rows and the weeds curling through cracked gravel. Kayla pulled her jacket tighter, watching her breath form clouds. She shifted her grip on the rifle fingers, twitching slightly. Across from her, Thalia stood still, shoulders square, eyes level. No uniform, no medals. Just the same worn flannel sleeves rolled halfway up today. Her voice cut clean through the cold. Again. Kayla raised the rifle, breathed in through her nose, squeezed, not jerked the trigger. The shot rang out, ricochet fading into the woods. Too tense, Thalia said calmly. You're trying to control the weapon. Let it move with you. They had been here since dawn. 2 rifles. 2 cups of black coffee long gone cold beside a dented thermos. No music. No instructions on paper. Only repetition, breath, and grit. Between rounds, Thalia would make small adjustments, elbow here, foot there, eyes on the periphery. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Kayla wiped her palms on her jeans. How many times do I have to fail before I get it right? Thalia knelt beside her, brushing frost from the edge of a knee pad. You're not failing. You're unlearning. That's harder. They moved through drills, slow breathing, shifting stance, sight alignment. When Kayla's shoulders began to sag, Thalia called a break. She poured from the thermos into both cups, steam curling like ghosts. As Kayla sipped, she noticed the small scar just beneath Talia's left wrist, a pale line nearly hidden. Thalia caught her glance. Shrapnel, she said simply, from when I hesitated. Silence fell again. Did you ever think you'd make it back? Kayla asked. Thalia looked past the rusted targets toward the distant tree line. I didn't think about making it back. I thought about keeping my team alive. I only succeeded halfway. Kayla hesitated, then pulled out her notebook. Their names, she asked softly. Thalia nodded. Hastings, Mendez, Quinn, Rourke. They each had a reason for being there, and a mistake that cost them. Sometimes mine. She didn't elaborate. The wind picked up. A hawk circled above, silent in its glide. Kayla flipped a page. Do you ever think, maybe I'm just doing this because Jake died? Thalia didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt and opened her rifle case. She pulled out a cloth, began cleaning without urgency. When someone you love dies in uniform, she said slowly, you start believing you owe the world something. You don't. But if you choose to serve anyway, then do it to stay alive, not to even the score. Kayla nodded, words caught behind her teeth. Thalia stood again and motioned toward the targets. Last drill. This time Kayla's hands didn't shake. Her breath came steady. She moved like she had been doing it for years, not perfect, but present. When the final shot cracked the air, she lowered the rifle, chest rising and falling. She didn't smile. Would Jake have made it? She asked. Thalia's eyes narrowed, not unkind. If someone like you had taught him, maybe. They began to pack the gear in silence. From behind the gate, a figure appeared. Dale wrapped in his coat, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak, just stepped forward and handed Thalia a folded envelope. She took it, nodded once. Dale turned without a word and walked back down the gravel road. Kayla watched her open it. Inside was a photo, faded, official, a mission roster. Her name had once been blacked out, but now the ink had been scratched clean away. One word had been written beneath it in capital letters: respect. Kayla wrote in her notebook, not for glory, for life. She underlined it twice. The parade was over, the bunting taken down. But at Miller's Diner, something had changed. A week had passed since Veterans Day, but the town of Cypress Ridge still carried its aftertaste like cinnamon on the tongue, faint but lingering. Thanksgiving prep was in full swing. Inside Miller's Diner, the air smelled of pumpkin spice and warm bread rolls. Aluminum foil-wrapped pies lined the window ledge. The radio hummed low with oldies. Thalia moved behind the counter just as she always had, same apron, same quiet rhythm, but something in her shoulders no longer folded inward. She no longer avoided eye contact. She poured coffee the same way, cleaned tables the same way, but the silence around her had shifted. It wasn't suspicion now, it was something softer. Deference, maybe. By the register, a corkboard had appeared. Small, unassuming. At the top, hand-lettered in black marker, were the words, "Veterans we forgot to thank." Beneath it, a list of names. Some were real, some initials. One stood out. Ghost 23, written small and steady near the bottom. The bell above the door jingled. Kayla stepped inside, her coat. Zipped hair pulled neatly into a bun. Her eyes searched the diner, not anxiously, but with a purpose. She carried a small canvas pouch in her hands. Thalia greeted her with a nod. No fuss. No theatrics. Kayla slid onto a stool, leaned her arms on the counter. "I ship out tomorrow," she said quietly. "I figured," Thalia replied, pouring her a cup of coffee. No cream. Just the way she'd taken it the past few mornings. "I wanted to give you something." Kayla opened the pouch and pulled out a small brass compass worn smooth at the edges. It was Jake's. He kept it in his sock, thought it was lucky. He didn't know it pointed north half the time. She smiled, then held it out. "So you always find your way back." Thalia didn't take it right away. But when she did, she turned it in her hand once, then tucked it gently into her pocket. "Thank you," she said. "Nothing more." The bell jingled again. Dale and Langston walked in together, two shadows from an older war, slower in their stride. They didn't approach with ceremony, just a nod. They sat at their usual booth. When Thalia brought over black coffee, Dale slid an envelope across the table. She raised an eyebrow. "It's for the marksmanship class at the high school," he said gruffly. "In memory of your team." Langston added, "They called you a ghost, but your silence taught more than my speeches ever did." Thalia didn't reply. Instead, she walked back to the counter and returned to her post, fingers folding napkins, eyes occasionally lifting to the windows, where late autumn light streamed in amber hues. Behind her, just above the pie shelf, hung a new frame. A photograph of 6 soldiers' arms linked, dust caking their uniforms. Beneath it, handwritten in careful script, they mattered. Still do. Laughter broke through the hum of conversation as Mr. Boyd, cane in hand, shouted from his table, "Thalia karaoke night at VFW's tomorrow. You bringing that golden voice of yours, or what?" Thalia turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Only if you promise not to sing Free Bird again." The diner chuckled. Kayla stood to leave, pulling her coat tight. At the door, she looked back one final time. Thalia was watching her, steady, proud. She gave the smallest nod. Outside, Kayla passed a recruiter. She doesn't stop. She walks by shoulders, straight face, calm. She doesn't need validation. Neither did Thalia. Some stories don't end with headlines or fanfare. Sometimes they sit quietly behind a counter, wearing an apron, offering warm coffee and steadier truths. Because real courage often walks beside kindness, and the strongest hearts rarely ask to be seen. Like a porch light left on in the night, Compassion waits not to be praised, but to guide someone home. If this story spoke to you, perhaps today is the day to see someone not for how they appear, but for what they carry quietly within.